Now we shift our attention to queries on multiple tables. These are queries that perform joins. And the main distinction here is that the from clause now has a list of tables. Conceptually, the main change is that in our queries, we have more than one table. In the upper right, we have a list of tables. And in the first step of our pipeline, we have a cross product of the relations. We're going to talk about what that means in a minute, but basically you're going to take the tables in the from clause and form all combinations of their tuples. This is going to create a big relation conceptually, which we will then filter with where and project with select and so on down the rest of this pipeline. Now note that this is likely a terribly inefficient strategy for evaluating this query, and a good query optimizer will find more efficient plans than this one for executing the query. But this is the right conceptual way to think about the query. It's really like a query over a single table, but that single table is generated as the cross product of the relations in the from clause. So what is this cross product? Well, here's an example with two tables, our sailors table from our boating club and the reserve table that tells us when sailors have reserved a boat. And to form their cross product, what we're going to do is form all combinations of sailor tuples and reserve tuples concatenated together with sailors on the left and reserves on the right. So you see Popeye concatenated with reservations for 912, 913, and 1011. And then you see olive oil concatenated with all three of the reserves as well. And if we went through this, we'd see Garfield and Bob each concatenated with all three of the reserves tuples. This is a very big table, this cross product. But now let's look at a more practical query, sailors who've reserved a boat. So looking at the query in the upper right, we want to combine the sailors and reserve table. That's the from clause. So we're going to form the cross product of those two tables, which we saw in the previous slide. In the where clause, though, we're only going to keep rows in the cross product where the sailor's SID equals the reserve's SID. All right, and if we look at our cross product down here, that rules out a bunch of things that we're looking at. And what we're left with are sailor IDs that match reservations. It's as if we're looking up the reservations for each sailor. Popeye with sailor ID 1, we only want reservations for sailor ID 1. All right, but this is sort of can be thought of as a where clause selection over the cross product. Now in the select list, we only ask for three columns, the sailor's SID, the S name, and the BID. And so we can remove the other columns from consideration, leaving us with this answer to the query. Okay, so it's a small output to the query that was formed by forming the big cross product and then applying the where clause and the select clause.